Good morning. And welcome to the Joint Money Committee meeting. I'm Louise Lucas, and most of you know already. I'm Chair of Senate Finance and Appropriations Committee. And today I will be chairing the meeting along with Delegate Torian, Chair of the House Appropriations Committee, and Delegate Watts, Chair of the House Finance Committee. The purpose of today's meeting is to receive the governor's remarks regarding the general fund revenues and the performance of Virginia's economy for fiscal year 2025. We will hear from Governor Youngkin momentarily. His remarks will be followed with a more detailed presentation by the Secretary of Finance, Steve Cummings. Now I will ask you to welcome His Excellency Glenn Youngkin, Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. I think you might be, since this is your last time.
That's pretty good.
Can't stop now.
I'm not.
Good morning.
That's my buddy. You're getting there.
Madam Chair, if we had 140, we would even take longer.
Governor, I think you just started a tradition.
Thank you. That's a good one. Thank you.
Very good. Welcome, Governor.
Thank you. I'm kind of hidden back here. Yes.
Now I would present to you His Excellency Glenn Youngkin, the Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Here we go. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Morning. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Chair Lucas, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Chairman Torian, Chair Watts, all of the members of the various money committees, friends in the General Assembly, of course, Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earle-Sears, my amazing cabinet who has served so dutifully, and of course, to the First Lady of the Commonwealth of Virginia, Suzanne Youngkin. I want to thank you. I want to thank you first for the opportunity to be here this morning to provide an update on the Commonwealth's 2025 financial status. But I also want to thank you for your partnership. your partnership that has collectively allowed us to serve together to bring Virginia to an extraordinary position of financial strength. And so I want to give all of you a round of applause for your help, your partnership, and your leadership in getting us here. So thank you. Thank you. I also am excited about the opportunity to discuss where Virginia must continue to go in order to continue to deliver for the 8.8 million people that we are so privileged to serve here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Now, as we gather here on August 14th, 1 month into our fiscal year of 2026, I see 4 truths in our great Commonwealth's current financial standing. 1, Virginia is as strong financially as she has ever been. 2, the outperformance that we saw in fiscal year 2025 and see again in the first month of 2026, combined with carryover balances from 2025, creates $1.7 billion in a cash cushion as we head into fiscal year 2026. Based on what we know today, this cushion and the prudent nature of our 2026 forecast provide great confidence that we can achieve the budget for the second year of this biennium. 3, our economic development successes and the resulting business investment and job growth are foundational for our current and future financial strength. We must continue to champion pro-business policies, deregulation, protecting right to work, investing in business-ready sites and workforce readiness, and not adopting anti-business practices that have been seen in many states that are falling behind. And 4, many of the concerns expressed earlier this year have receded. Some do persist, such as the expected reduction in the federal workforce, and how quickly these Virginians will find new opportunities in the Commonwealth's deep well of available jobs, which is currently estimated to be roughly 250,000 available and unfilled positions. And while the $1.7 billion cash cushion provides great comfort, there is important work to do in advance of my December budget submission, including our GACR process. And I look forward to working together as we have done for the past 3.5 years to bring that process to fruition. The strength and success we see today is no accident. It's the result of very intentional decisions made by all of us. Intentional decisions to lift up opportunity in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And these decisions are yielding dividends. They're enabling us to compete and to win. As I said, the Commonwealth of Virginia's fiscal position is as strong as it has ever been. During our administration, we collectively have run surplus after surplus after surplus, totaling $10 billion in excess revenue. We have a large carryover balance, funds appropriated but not spent, thanks to prudent fiscal management and bringing efficiency back to government. We have maintained a conservative debt load with an incremental borrowing capacity available of $1.3 billion per year. And our rainy day fund balances at fiscal year end 2025 were $4.7 billion. Well done. We have a strong balance sheet. And that strong balance sheet is reflected in our sterling AAA credit rating, which was recently reaffirmed even as our neighbors in Maryland and Washington, D.C. saw theirs downgraded. Because it's not about geography, it's about responsible fiscal management. My friends, we collectively have seen success exceeding even optimistic expectations. We again outperformed in fiscal year 2025, and we are ahead in the first month of fiscal 2026. In the fiscal year just ended, Virginia outperformed our original expectations by nearly $2.7 billion, or an additional $572 million above the $2.1 billion that was in the reforecast that we agreed in the budget amendments this past spring. General fund revenue grew by more than 6% over the past fiscal year. And to start the new fiscal year, July revenues grew 7.3% year over year, exceeding projections by nearly $145 million. Wage growth and consumer spending have been strong, lifting sales tax collections up as well, coming in 2.2% higher compared to this time last year. Individual income taxes were up 7.8% in 2025, while corporate income taxes were down 1.5%. We have built a cash cushion, as I mentioned, of $1.7 billion as of August 1st. Aside from this cash cushion, given the strong performance in 2025, 2026 forecasted revenue only requires growth of $127 million, or 0.4% over the 2025 results of $31.2 billion in order for us to meet plan in 2026. Our strong revenue enables us to invest, to save, and yes, to provide substantial tax relief. From day one, we collectively recognized that there are winning states and losing states, and we decided that we were going to be a winning state. We needed to invest. We needed to invest in the building blocks of a dynamic economy, things like site development. So when companies make a decision to come to Virginia, there's a great shovel-ready site for them to begin construction upon. And when you invest in these critical building blocks, and when you do lower tax burdens by providing the $9 billion of tax relief that we have, again, collectively provided Virginians during our administration, when we streamline regulations by 25%, saving taxpayers $1.2 billion annually, we kick in an amazing and virtuous cycle, and it kicks into high gear. A cycle that we have seen play out over and over and over again. A reinforcing cycle that leads to opportunity in Virginia, but also revenue growth. Revenue growth driven by more businesses coming to Virginia, revenue growth driven by more people working in Virginia, revenue growth driven by more people moving to Virginia, by more people paying taxes in Virginia. And when you have strong revenue, it allows all of us to invest in key priorities like education and public safety, healthcare, behavioral health. It allows us to build a rainy day fund that is one of the strongest in the nation. It allows us to deliver tax relief to keep us competitive with our neighboring states, all of whom, except for Maryland, are reducing tax burdens. From day one, we have locked arms together, and we've been clear that we can run a both-and game plan, not an either-or. Every single year, we've collectively funded record investments to keep Virginians safe. We've funded record investments to keep Virginians healthy. We've funded record investments to support students and teachers all across the Commonwealth. And we've done all this, and meanwhile, we've been able to provide $9 billion in tax relief that belongs to the people who earned it, not to government. Foundational to our current fiscal strength has been successful economic development and strong job growth all across the Commonwealth. The Compete to Win agenda has put us in the driver's seat to keep steering Virginia's financial future in high gear. We've seen this Compete to Win agenda deliver and pay dividends time and time again. Over the past 3.5 years, the Commonwealth has secured over $125 billion in capital commitments to invest, to build new factories, to build new headquarters, to build new distribution facilities, new research facilities, right here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, by companies who see Virginia as their long-term future home. And of course, what does all that investment translate into? Lots and lots of great jobs. Today, we have over 265,000 more people working in Virginia than when we all started together 3.5 years ago. Over 265,000 people who have heard those powerful words, "You are hired." Virginia has roughly 250,000 open jobs today. Jobs driven in part by the over 15,000 high-growth startups that have opened in Virginia in the last 3 years. And on top of that, the $125 billion in business commitments underpin an additional 80,000 jobs that will provide future opportunities for Virginians across this great Commonwealth. And because Virginia has jobs, and because we're competing to win, and because we are a top destination for talent, more people are choosing to call Virginia their home. Perhaps the most important measure was in 2023, we reversed the decade-long trend of net out-migration. Now, I know it's not surprising to anyone here that I mentioned this, since I've talked about it since our very first moment together. But for the first time in a long time in 2023, more people moved to the Commonwealth of Virginia than moved away to the other 49 states. But this virtuous cycle, the successful economic development cycle, the successful strong growth cycle, the successful budget surplus cycle, doesn't happen on its own. Because to win, we collectively have to compete. We have to compete for talent. We have to compete for jobs. We have to compete for growth. We have to compete for economic development. And we've witnessed opportunity come all across the Commonwealth as we have successfully competed. But my message today is that no matter where you are in Virginia, everyone needs to be engaging in economic development. We should be collaborating at all levels across the state, like we do, particularly with the great support from our MEI members, but also local levels as well. We should be working to grow all economies. The bottom line is most localities compete like crazy. And while some areas win more than others, they all are competing, and winning, and growing, and seeing the benefits for their citizens. They work hand in hand with VEDP, hand in hand with the Department of Energy, DHCD, and of course, hand in hand with our legislature, hand in hand with the effort you all put in order to, yes, help us bring economic opportunity. We have been providing incentives and investing in sites and building workforce, and Virginians are the beneficiary. However, there are select counties that have not been eager to collaborate to offer the kinds of incentives that are necessary to attract business opportunities And it means that they are losing out on these opportunities. And so I would ask all of us to lock arms together with areas that might be late to the party or chosen not to attend the party at all. It's not too late. It's not too late for everyone here to fully engage in the collaboration that leads to winning and to economic growth. One community that has been especially resilient this past year has been Southwest Virginia. Hurricane Helene brought destruction and devastation that truly shocked us all. Virginians were affected by the storm, including farmers and forest landowners. But Southwest stood strong, and our administration and the General Assembly stood strong with them every step of the way to help Southwest recover and rebuild. Recently, Virginia became one of only 2 states in the nation to sign block grants with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Block grants that can flow directly to our farmers and forest landowners to unlock opportunity to recover. This critical aid will in fact flow starting next month. This aid will keep Virginia's rural economy strong and resilient. And they will guarantee that our first and third largest private industries, agriculture and forestry, continue to feed, fuel, and clothe citizens all across the Commonwealth and across this great nation. The strong foundation that we have built gives me every confidence that the spirit of Virginia will continue to thrive and the Commonwealth will continue to soar. But for that to happen, we need to continue to do the right things and to do the things we know work, and candidly, not to do the wrong things. What do I mean by that? I mean, we need to continue to invest in sites. We need to continue to drive workforce development and our talent accelerator program and innovative partnerships. It means we have to protect right to work. We need not impose government mandates on businesses. It also means that we need to pull together and recognize the power challenges that we have in the Commonwealth of Virginia. VASIA is not working for Virginia. We know VASIA is not working because energy bills are way too high and ratepayers are the ones paying the prices. We know VASIA is not working because we are too reliant on importing too much power from out of state. We know VASIA is not working because $5.5 billion in compliance costs are projected to be passed along to ratepayers over the next 10 years. And we know VASIA isn't working because we face a looming reliability crisis without enough baseload power to meet Virginia's growing energy needs. So as we collectively head into the fall and the next legislative cycle, I encourage us to come together to figure out how to unwind VASIA and make power work for Virginia. Keeping Virginia thriving also means working productively with the federal government. There's no substitute for doing the work, for picking up a phone and calling people to arrive at real solutions. We've had approximately $2.5 billion of federal programs and grants that were paused at some point over the course of this year. We've been able to constructively work to get $2.1 billion of the $2.5 billion flowing again. And of the remaining $420 million, roughly $300 million of it was COVID funding that was expiring anyway. One thing we need to make sure is that we don't revert back to when Virginia wasn't business friendly. I've said this many times. We compete in the SEC of economic development. We see the best competitors from the best states that are doing everything they can to not just win economic development projects from us, but to encourage companies that are here to move away. The competition is fierce. And Virginia has not only been competing, we have been winning. And we need to keep it that way. As I said, we are in an incredibly strong financial position. We're even in a stronger financial position than we were just a few months ago. And let me say that again. We are in a stronger financial position today because we have more money and less uncertainty than we did just 6 months ago. Many of the things that caused some uncertainty earlier in the year have been addressed. The stock market is at an all-time high. Trade deals are getting cut, and DC gridlock has not materialized. That doesn't mean that all risks are alleviated. And there is always more work to do, but we are in a position to achieve our 2026 budget. Now, to that end, recent changes to Medicaid and SNAP will be addressed in my December submission for the next biennium budget. Just yesterday, I issued 2 executive directives. One on unlocking federal rural health care transformation funds, and the second on reducing SNAP error rates. Rural health care providers can receive help from H.R. 1. And because of the actions we are taking, Virginia stands to receive at least $500 million and possibly up to $1 billion to drive rural health care transformation and expand services in the rural parts of our state. I do want to be clear. Changes to Medicaid are not taking coverage away from anyone. And I want to say that again. Not a single Virginian is losing access to Medicaid or getting kicked off the program. Not 40,000 Virginians, not whatever number someone else is saying on a given day. No Virginians are losing their Medicaid coverage. Medicaid was designed for families and children in poverty. It was designed for persons with disabilities. It was designed for the elderly who need long-term care support. It was not designed for permanent health care for able-bodied people who were capable of working, going to school, or volunteering in their communities. Starting in 2027, to be eligible for Medicaid, enrollees who are able-bodied adults without dependents to care for are going to have to either work, go to school, or engage in community service, or some combination of those 3 for 18 and a half hours a week. 18 and a half hours a week, or 80 hours a month. I believe this is fair. It will ensure we strengthen and protect the program for the people it was designed for, but it also opens up an avenue to dignity, to get a job, to go to school, or to volunteer in our communities. Regarding SNAP, the reality is that Virginia's error rate is too high, and it has been that way for nearly a decade. Based on the error rate, states will have to pay a state share starting in 2027. These programs are administered by the localities, not by the state. And many localities have significant issues that drive up the state's average error rate. So we're going to go to work. We're going to go to work together. We're going to go to work with the localities to get our error rate down and drive Virginia's state share, which could be reduced to zero, to the lowest place we can get it. My friends, over the past 3.5 years, we have been on an amazing journey together. A journey where we have grown, a journey where we have unlocked opportunity and lifted up people across the Commonwealth, a journey where we have strengthened the spirit of Virginia together, and a journey that has led Virginia to be as strong financially as she has ever been. And while pride is a bad thing, I have to say, I'm proud of the progress that we have made together. I'm confident that if we continue to work together on shared priorities, we continue to work together to deliver policies that we know work, we continue to work together to put Virginians first, then this great Commonwealth's future will continue to be bright, and Virginia will continue to lead the nation. I want to thank all of you again for your partnership, for your collaboration, and for the collective work that has made Virginia the very best state in America to live and to work and to raise a family. May God bless you. May He continue to bless the great Commonwealth of Virginia. And again, I thank you for entertaining my comments this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. I know my committee has questions, but I think we'll probably pose all those to Secretary Cummings. So now I'll ask you to welcome Secretary Cummings so you can make your presentation. And before we get started, Secretary Cummings, I would like to just reiterate the remarks that I normally make at this time, and that is that once you proceed with your presentation, we'll hold all questions until the end of the presentation. Also want to reiterate that I would only take questions from members of the Money Committee. If other members have questions, please ask the Secretary once the meeting adjourns. Secretary Cummings, please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you, Chair Lucas, Chair Torian, Chair Watts, members of the committees. Really appreciate being here today. It's hard to believe that this is 3.5 years time passed. I will say that I have learned incredible amounts about how things work and tremendous amount from all of you, and I appreciate that. One thing, the most important thing I've learned is the amazing resilience of Virginia. And this report, I think, is just a testament to all the work that's been done by everybody in this room and an amazing state that continues to figure it out, be prudent about how they manage the finances and deliver results. So it's been a fantastic experience. So fiscal year in review, we'll talk about economics, and we will talk about where we stand going into the future. Revenues finished $572 million, or 1.9% above the official forecast in the 2025 Appropriations Act, Chapter 725. Biggest driver of that was stronger than expected non-withholding tax revenues, which was partially offset by also higher than anticipated income tax refunds. Comparing that to the Common Ground budget forecast from Chapter 2, which was done in December of 2023, special session, collections came in 2.7% or 9.3% higher. Overall, total general fund revenues grew by $1.8 billion or 6.1% over the prior year, an amazing statistic. Net individual income tax collections were $334 million, or 1.6% ahead of forecast, and $1.6 billion, or 7.8% above last year's level. Sales tax collections ended the year above forecast by $14.8 billion, not a big number, 0.3%. They were up $103 million, or 2.2% compared to the prior year. Corporate income taxes were up by 4.9% over forecast. From an economic perspective, fiscal year 2025 played out largely in line with the assumptions underpinning the revenue forecast. We did start to see some federal government job reductions in the data, which we will certainly talk about, mainly from reduced hiring, which I will make clear to you, but they really haven't shown much of an impact on the financial results of the Commonwealth. Consumer sentiment, which we've watched closely, has, after a meaningful dip in the March through May timeframe, have rebounded, and more positive outlooks as some of the uncertainties have been taken care of to some extent. And the most recent U.S. jobs report surprised everybody, the adjustment. I'm sure we'll talk about that, and does indicate higher concerns about job growth in the country. And we will be getting Virginia's updated job growth in next Tuesday for the month of July, and get an idea of where we stand in light of the U.S. forecast, our U.S. results we just received. Looking at the numbers, you can see here the first box is year-over-year actuals. The second box is versus Chapter 2 of 2025. And the third is for the Chapter 725 budget delivered last December. In those numbers, we can see that we ended with $572 million above forecast on the far right. Two of the very important key sources we look at to see about how well we've modeled the economic assumptions are withholding and sales tax, core revenue streams. There are two largest of the core outside of non-withholding, which we look at through a different lens, came in exceptionally close to forecast. Withholding was only 0.1% short of forecast, and sales came in about 0.3 higher. Both of those sources are also closely aligned with key economic indicators in income and consumption, and we're happy to see the 5% growth in withholding and 2.2% in sales. The $572 million surplus over forecast came mainly in the form of another good year for non-withholding income. That came in 10.7% over forecast, but was balanced against higher than forecasted refunds. Combined, the two are responsible for $350 million of that increase. You can see that up in the chart. If you go, let's go to the far right versus Chapter 725. Non-withholding was up $730 million, 10.7%. Refunds, $376 million greater than expected, to net out to a 1.6 is for the total category, but you can, through those two numbers, see $350 million coming out of those two lines. So obviously the performance of the stock market and other private entities has been well above the expectations that were built into a prudent forecast. You've seen this chart before, now updated, showing $10 billion in revenue surpluses versus the original forecast. It's just been a great trend in revenues, general overperformance every year. You can see that 725 for this is now at 1.1 with the update that we have in our reforecast adjustment to 31.4 for expectations on FY 2026. Another important statistic, and this is in new information with some of the detail, is the concept of unspent appropriations, which you've heard about before. So unspent appropriations is obviously money that was in the budget that didn't go out the door. There are numerous sources for this, so let me explain that to you. The first is we've had, obviously, with the flow of funds, a significant increase in one-time expenditures, and there's been a lot of pre-funding of programs that will take more than that budget year to execute on. So those funds stay in the bank and will be deployed to complete those projects. The second is a fundamental challenge in budgeting is every new program that's launched, we assume it starts day one at full cost, which is obviously not the case. It takes a while to ramp up and hire the people to implement the program. So that leads to excess dollars that are not deployed in that certain year. There's also the budgeted but unfilled positions. Some of that is due to what I've said above, the launch of new programs, but it also has to do with the ongoing turnover within a program and length of time it takes to refill open positions. We've had a significant challenge in filling open positions, particularly in the last couple of years coming out of COVID when the labor market was so tight. We're seeing that actually get better, more applicants, more qualified applicants for jobs, and we've been filling a lot of positions. And actually, Senator Servell, I know what you're thinking. You sent me an email asking for info. It is on my desk to send you the answer. But let me just say on that point, because the question was, gosh, I suspect or I have heard that you are intentionally not filling open positions as a way to generate higher levels of unspent appropriations. That's not surplus. It's money that frees up to be put back into the forthcoming budget. And that, I have said, is absolutely not what has been done. There have been no mandates on freezing spending, no desire to tell people, no, don't fill those spots. In fact, over the course of the governor's term, we've added 11,821 jobs to the rolls of the Commonwealth government, total employment. That's confirmed separately by a study that BLS does, which said 11,800. So I assure you that that's not been a part of the program. It's just the friction within the system that has that money that is available at year end. Next chart is, oh, and I'm sorry, I need to point out one other thing. We identified too late last night to fix that last column. The unspent appropriation for 2025 is actually $2 billion. There was an update to some of the year-end work that was done. So it's $2 billion. The 0.48 is still right. So it's actually $1.6 billion that is in the mandatory account. And that is obviously what's happened here over the last couple of years, or actually pre-administration. And if you look back in time, pre-COVID, it was typical that you would have unspent appropriations of kind of 1% to 3%. I think everybody would agree. It's kind of crazy that we have unspent appropriations of 4% to 8%. That's money that's just sitting there not being put to use. And it's not how things should be run. So historically, it's been 1% to 3%. But just with the sheer magnitude of the budgets, it has jumped up to this kind of 4% to 8%. And I would expect as budgeting starts to flatten out a bit in revenues, that it will on its own start to tighten up. Economic variables, just to show you where we stand on the FY 2024-25 forecast and what the actual was. And I will say this is a testament to our economics and revenue forecasting team under Commissioner Alex. We've built a first-rate team, brought some real science to analysis, and not just reporting the numbers, but explaining the whys. And under Charles Kennington, I don't know where he is. There he is, right here. And his team, we really have a great process for now and the future. So you can see on the leftmost column, these are the assumptions that we came into this budget with. In the middle is actual, and the assumptions were pretty darn close to what actually occurred, particularly in the areas that have the most bearing on our revenue outcome. Only meeting deviations were GSP, gross state product, not something, it's interesting, but it's not something that drives our forecast. And then inflation, which came in about 0.4% above expectations. But on the key ones for our revenues, employment growth, personal income, average wage, and taxable sales, we are extremely close to in what happened to what was forecast. Job growth has slowed significantly in recent months, and in particular, post the adjustment that was announced not too long ago. It is slowing. I think that's not a surprise for everybody. 2024 employment was growing year over year in Virginia, about 1.5% to 2%. January to June, it was 1.2%, and June's year over year was 0.8%. From June 24 to 25, non-farm employment increased by about 36,000 jobs to 4.3 million jobs, non-farm jobs in Virginia. Private sector employment increased by 28,000 positions. Government increased by 7,500, and that was a decrease in federal jobs of federal government jobs of 7,800. State government jobs increased by 5,300, and local increased by 10,000. Education, health services, construction, and were both up meaningfully, and the losses occurred primarily in professional and business services and manufacturing. Unemployment. I think we all know that it has been ticking up. You can see here for the first 6 months of 2025, it's kind of been on a slow tick for Virginia up here to 3.5%. The federal level has grown as well. The gap is narrowing. And then on the effective wage rate, actually, Virginia still is keeping pace in terms of wage growth, which is, I think, a good indicator of, unemployment is going up, but there still is competition out there, and so wages are hanging on. Putting this in context, and as I was preparing for this, thinking back to my old economics class in college of the concept of what's natural unemployment, what's kind of the friction in the system, and what would be considered low unemployment versus higher unemployment. And it's clear that natural unemployment is at a 4 or higher level, and that we at 3.5% are still technically in what would be defined as a low unemployment environment. It is slowing. Who knows what it will look like going down the road, but we're still in a pretty darn good spot. And we've done some informal polling of our GACR members before this call. Not everybody, but a selected group of people. And it's clear they're also having better time being able to find employees, but it's not where it still is something they're not feeling the pressure, and so they're having to still compete with wages, which is keeping that up at that 3.5% level. U.S. job gains, non-farm payrolls increased by 73,000, but as we all know, the shock of the revisions of the data really were stunning and really caused the whole market to say, well, wait a minute, this isn't really what I was expecting, and it's led to expectations around Fed rate cuts, and obviously a lot of debate around the validity of the BLS data that's collected, and I'm happy to talk about that as well. Unemployment, we watch this obviously very closely, Secretary Slater and his team, and we just pulled a couple things here, and our team, what we tend to look at more is the continued claims. I think we see initial claims bounce all over the place, and you can see that continued claims is a better indicator of who has actually filed and is continuing to draw, and so which means they still haven't found a job. And so watching that trend over time, you see here they are higher year over year by 4,600. Not a huge number, but it is 27% increase. And they are, as the point here is made, it's up, increasing off a base of exceptionally low unemployment. And on the right-hand side, you can see a 10-year average that we're still just breaking into that 10-year weekly average. Interestingly, and it's not that evident here, but when you really get down into the weeds, if you look at the last 5 weeks, continued claims have actually pretty nicely flattened out, not calling that anything is over and the sun is coming back out because we're all concerned about jobs. But it doesn't look and feel as, at the moment, that things have really hit. But we watch this in labor and finance work very closely on this. Federal government employment, you can see here since January, they've reduced net employment by more than 80,000 jobs nationwide. We've seen a share of that, 11,200 federal jobs lost. That's jobs, people who work in Virginia. It's important that we all note that the rest of Virginia's job market is still showing steady growth. So the right-hand chart on this is when you take out federal jobs, what's happening to everything else. And you can see here for the last several months, we're right on top of the federal number right now, but Virginia has consistently slightly exceeded the federal numbers going back through into 2023. Federal reductions, this is a really interesting chart. Federal reductions, which we are doing everything we can to watch what this means. This is national, and this is monthly. On the left-hand side is separations. That's separation for any reason. Retirements, layoffs, anything that says they're suddenly leaving their job. The right-hand side is the result of a hiring freeze. And as we know, at the beginning of the Trump administration, it was already down, so I will make that point, up through 2024. But the Trump administration has put a hiring freeze on and not refilling vacant positions. And that's what really is driving the downward trend in federal employment at this point. Another interesting stat, looking at our, by region, what's happening to employment. You can see here, looking at Northern Virginia, Hampton Roads, Richmond, and rest of Virginia, that the largest year-over-year job gain, and this is in percentage terms, is Northern Virginia, which is plus 15,000 for the month of June to 1,633,000 jobs, and a 0.9% increase. Second largest is Richmond. Richmond is really growing right now. In recent trends, it's kind of standing out across the Commonwealth, and they've added 12,500 jobs and 1.7%. Hampton Roads is the one that has declined slightly. You can see down 0.2%, and then the rest of Virginia is positive 0.9%. I would argue that that's not a terrible set of stats to be looking at in the environment versus what we all expected given what's happening in DC. Okay, consumer sentiment. Here on the left is the University of Michigan, probably the best known metric for understanding where the consumer is. Not surprising, over the course of January through March, April, so much uncertainty, and we all saw that plummet. As things have stabilized, we've seen a bounce back of University of Michigan. We've been looking for other ways to measure this. There are many out there, and our economics team found this, an Economic Policy Uncertainty Index. It comes through the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. It was created in the 2010 era, but they've built their data going back to 1900. And this is actually going out to major media publications. It's looking at federal tax code provisions set to expire and the dispersion of predictions for key economic indicators. What's the variability of economists and what they expect? So uncertainty and what lies ahead. And you can see here, going back to 2010, that it has bounced all over the place. A huge spike in 2025. Interesting, unprecedented for the last 15 years. But now a bit of a bounce back as obviously the world and uncertainty factor has diminished. Inflation, I would say, I think versus everybody's expectations, this continues to perform well. The CPI and PCE are the two that we track. PCE is a month lag. You can see that stops in June. July, we got the July print. And we look at both. The Fed tends to focus on PCE. And honestly, I think at this 2.6, 2.7 inflation, that's not bad versus I think what the world expected. We know the tariffs are still in the process of being implemented. And so expectations would be that we will see some rise in this. We've talked to a lot of people and gotten their input, looked at economic forecasts, and the kind of outlook here going in the future, next 6 to 12 months, is that it could get up to the 3, maybe 3.5% would be expectations. But nobody I can't say nobody, but nobody, I can't resist. The people are generally not expecting to see a real spike of inflation here that might have been expected when, obviously, they were talking about tariff rates that were much, much higher than we seem to be settling out in the mid to upper teens. Consumer spending is outpacing inflation to date. In latest reading for June, real spending was up 2.1%. That's very important to understand. And unemployment and debt burdens are low in the aggregate. Level of wealth continues to be high, which we know with jobs hanging in there and the other asset indicators of housing and stock market that people are feeling like they're in pretty good shape. Similarly, retail sales is up 3.9%, which I think is a pretty solid print. Local sales tax collections, another one. Let's take a look at how are we faring in the retail environment by region. And so our economics and forecasting team went to work. This is looking at the 1% local sales tax data, which will give us a good indication of what's going on. And you can see here pretty good numbers. Historic growth is 2010 to 2024, So we get a historical level, and then we compare it to what's actually happening in 2025. And you can see that actually some pretty healthy growth in sales tax for year-to-date 2025 across the board, with the lowest year-over-year growth being in West Central. But I think, again, pretty good indicator of the resiliency of Virginia and the state of the consumer through the first half of 2025. We also said, let's dig deeper on housing market indicators. That comes up a lot. You know, we all have stories about people we know or things we see. So we got to the Virginia Realtors folks, and they helped us put together a very nice analysis. There's a lot more data, but we selected these things to just get an indication. The volume of closed transactions year over year for the first 6 months, you can see Northern Virginia the same. Let's just stay in Northern Virginia. Median sold price is actually up 4%. Average active listings up 56%. I think we know we were at very low levels as things were super tight. That's obviously gotten a bit better. Median month of supply up 53%. You know, we're talking about weeks here because it was so tight previously, but still, you can't deny the increase that something is changing. Richmond, sales up 2, price up 3, listings up 21, 16. Hampton down in terms of closed sales, but still in every region, median sold price is up low to mid single digit, or 3 to 5%. And the other stats in terms of supply is high as well, but that pricing would indicate there's more supply, but there's demand that is there that is absorbing that supply. Economic growth remains positive. Likelihood of recession is low. The recession, you can see the right, that's just data on expectations, economic survey. The right one, the main point is showing where we've done into some big bounces here. And if you look at the last first quarter of Q1 25, Q2 25, you can see here the big driver is what's happening in exports and what's happening in inventories. So GDP is not like one thing, it's a compilation of things. Where is your spending going? And then what are you doing in terms of building inventory or actually reducing inventory? But throughout all that, the expectation is that we are going to have GDP that may well be down in the 1.5%, 1% here in the near term by consensus forecast, but back at the 2% level going forward. I don't think we need to remind people of this. This is helping our revenues a lot. It's honestly, it's been pretty incredible that a lot of news has happened. Obviously, the uncertainty in tariffs and other factors were a big hit to the market, but it has clearly rebounded and back on track. 2026 revenues. The governor mentioned we only need to grow 0.4% to achieve that target for next year. And if you look at the actuals on the left-hand side, you can see where our growth came from, and then what is our forecasted growth in those revenue categories required to meet next year's focus, or what will get us to our forecast. So we grew, just to take withholding, we grew at a 5% rate, 25 versus 24. Our forecast anticipates a 2.2% growth rate in withholding going forward. Non-withholding, there are some big deviations. I won't get into that. Non-withholding, I was skipping down to IT refunds, but non-withholding, we've built into our forecast a 15% drop in non-withholding. So we have expected, we had a decline expected for this last year and a further decline expected for next year. So if you think about it, okay, are we being too rosy? I think we've prepared for some stock market correction. And then you can go down here and say that sales and use at 3.6% might be a little bit optimistic. We just did 2.2% for 2025. And then the other ones are, corporate and the others are relatively small contributors, but it's only $127 million. So for what the governor said, we feel pretty darn good on barring some unexpected shock that we can meet the budget that is currently in the books. So now looking at our baseline forecast compared to the budget assumptions, and again, this will show you that what the actual rate experience was for 2025, what was the underlying assumption in 725, and then the Moody's baseline. And you see here that non-withholding our revenues exceed forecasts. They can go down by 15%, as I said before, but personal income, we said 3.5, Moody's has 5.1. We said 0.1, and I'm skipping up, employment growth 0.1, Moody's has 0.3. These are current estimates or forecasts by them. Taxable sales, 3.7 versus 3.4. Unemployment, 3.4, 3.5. Inflation, we were more conservative on that, 1.9 versus 3.3, which is not an unreasonable number based upon what we've heard. So again, feel pretty darn good. So in excess of 1.7 incremental resources available for 2026. This shows you the composition of that. First, the 572 coming from FY 2025, the 900 and governor's vetoes, the required set aside of $67 billion to get to 832, unspent appropriations of 2.1, and then the mandatory rolled over balance of 1.6. And then in the discretionary balance, obviously 200 is not the number, but that roughly $400 million difference from the 2.1 to the 1.6, or $400 million plus, if you go back historically, that unspent, the discretionary, some of that is rolled with, in consulting with DPB, we will look at it like a mandatory. This program is partially funded, it's in process, this should stay in the agency. And we go through a process with every agency to look at what do you have that isn't mandated to roll over and stay in the agency. And we have a discussion, what should stay in because it's still connected to something that's underway, as opposed to it just wasn't spent. And we don't have a plan for it because we have a new budget coming in that provides new funding. And that's the piece of that that would be pulled and drawn out to go into the next year's budget available for reappropriation. And we just, historically, it's been about 50% of that number, so that's what we've plugged. And then the excess revenue in July, which I'll talk about in a minute, which was about $145 million to get us to the 175 of available starting resources for the next year budgeting process. Here's July. Awesome month. Low revenue month, but the thing that I'm most excited about is what's happened in withholding. Because the other ones, you look at non-withholding, it might be a big number, but it's a big percentage, but it's a very small number because July is just a small revenue number. So I think withholding is most meaningful. I don't want to call the shot here with 1 month on withholding because that has some variability. I'll say that on behalf of my economics team because they always remind me of that. But it's a good place to start and get us set up to start out of the blocks here a bit ahead of the game. Obviously, with that number, we've already met next year's forecast because we've covered the 127 that's needed. But I'm not saying that. Projected revenue, projected reserves here. You are very familiar with this chart. Could not feel better about where we stand. Obviously, we have some funds coming out of that going into 2026, but we're at 4.5. We'll be at the end of 25 close to $5 billion, but we'll be at about $4.5 billion at the end of FY 2026 as we implement the budget. Revenue Reserve Fund withdrawals, Chapter 2 assumed a withdrawal of $129 in FY 2025 and $675 in 2026 from the Revenue Reserve Fund, while increasing the combined revenue reserve and revenue stabilization cap to 20% of certified revenues, as you recall. 725 increased the withdrawal to 3032 and began a plan to phase the combined cap back to the code established 15%. We've had that discussion. We are of the opinion that 15 is very adequate based upon a lot of other benchmarks, which we share, but I know the decision was made to leave it at 20. Combined cap was set at 17.5% of certified revenues for FY25, and even after the $330 million withdrawal, the combined balance is in excess of that with an additional 100.5 withdrawal from revenue reserve based upon statutory procedure. Balance sheet indicates an additional deposit to the Revenue Reserve Fund for overperformance of FY 2025 of $312 million. Wanted to share this. This is actually comes out of a Moody's presentation. given to this provided by Michael Mall coming back from the NASBO national meeting. And we had to include it because I think it's something to be very proud of. We were affirmed in April, and it couldn't be better meeting that we had with the rating agency, and comments and commendation for how Virginia has managed things and how we are presently stand, in particular compared to the experience of our neighbors. Downgraded, Maryland is downgraded in May of 2025. Their story is complicated. They were put on negative watch way back in May of 2024. Governor Moore came in 2023, and I think some of you are familiar that implemented some pretty aggressive run rate spending, particularly around education, and some expectations, revenues that were beyond what came to pass. And so they were put on negative watch back in April of 2024, and there was a lot of noise around that, and then they were downgraded in May of 2025. District of Columbia, I think, just has more inherent challenges, and it was some budgeting challenges, but I think has been hit particularly hard, particularly with commercial real estate challenges, and I think that was felt a bit inevitable. And I know they're all working hard to engineer it, but I think Virginia really does stand out, and it's back to just all the good work that everybody has been doing to manage Virginia in a solid way. So this is where we end up as the year-end balance sheet, and just drawing your eyes to the pieces of this that are highlighted in green. We have indicates reservations of the $572 million from our excess revenues allocated for MESDEP, water quality improvement, deposit to the Revenue Reserve Fund, and to offset potential reductions in federal funding as directed in Chapter 725. Additionally, $778 million in FY 2025 revenues were designated for providing individual income tax rebates of $200 for individuals, $400 for joint filers. For disbursement in October, our tax team and Treasury team are very much on track to get that done. And then finally, $839 million resulting largely from the governor's veto actions in May, reserved for other budgetary priorities and contingencies. Just to pause on some of the tax actions. Again, while we've done all these great things and generated these surpluses, what has been done by everybody to enhance the citizens' financial position for over the past few years on tax relief measures? Several increases the standard deduction, eliminate tax on groceries, individual income tax rebates, and then the military retirement income tax subtraction. And you can see that the sum total of that is about $12,700 per family. So impressive. Many of those are run rate. Obviously, the rebates that exist in that are one time, but the rest of that are run rate saves. Very, very good thing to be proud of. And this is just more of that in greater detail, showing the impact by budget dollars, that the rebates here are about $3 billion of the total amount that has been returned to taxpayers. Medicaid and SNAP. You can see here policy changes, the one big beautiful bill. Keep the Medicaid program in place for people it was created to serve, persons with disabilities, the elderly who need long-term care support, and families with children in poverty. The governor covered this, but it is obviously asking able-bodied adults without children to fulfill some basic requirements to get up, find part-time work, volunteer, or go to school. No one who is eligible for Medicaid in Virginia will lose coverage because of these work requirements. 80 hours a month, which translates into 18 and a half hours per week. In 2018, the last time this was studied, JLARC did a study that was requested by all of you, and they estimated at that point in time, applying their calculation to today's world, that 7% of the Medicaid expansion population would be deterred from enrolling, would choose not to enroll based upon the work requirements and leave Medicaid, the Medicaid program. applied today's population, that would impact, by their own choice, 40,000 Virginians. Hospital provider tax assessments will result in lower Medicaid reimbursements to hospital beginning in 2028. I think there is a lot of mischaracterization, misunderstanding, and what the impact will be. It's going to have an impact for the hospitals in particular, but it's not a sudden hit. It's not like it's a one-time thing. This is phased in over 10 years to gradually reduce the reimbursements to hospitals, beginning in FY 2028. Similarly, SNAP will have a general fund expenditure impact beginning in FY 2027. One, to take a share of the administrative costs, but more importantly is what the governor mentioned on error rates, which we would have to fund if we can't reduce our error rate below 6%. We would have to partially fund some of those expenditures. Virginia is going to receive a minimum of $500 million for the rural transformation and up to potentially $1 billion over the next 5 years to help support the transformation of services in the rural areas. And the governor has issued yesterday 2 directives that get us going on both of those pieces, so we are well prepared to manage them effectively and eliminate some of those challenges. Importantly, no program or policy changes are required prior to the General Assembly session in December, starting in January, sorry. Here's a good timeline of what is going to happen here. Part of this is just so you'll understand what's happening when, but also to make it clear, there's no impact on 2026. The only impact is Virginia will receive its first disbursement of the Rural Health Transformation Fund, the first $100 million. And the work will begin to start to address the SNAP error rates. Of course, there's going to be other planning to get prepared for the other things that are in that timeline beginning in 27 and 28, which will all be provided for in the introduced budget. So, just in summary here, Commonwealth is in incredibly strong position, I think remarkable from probably where we were all talking not too long ago and expectations of challenges. Nobody is saying that we will not have challenges. We have less uncertainties, but we still have uncertainties and maybe some different ones to deal with. But we feel very good about where we begin and the financial flexibility that the Commonwealth has. 2026 revenues that's the, I think, biggest takeaway. Thanks to conservative forecasting, we don't have to do much to just deliver what is the underpinning of the current budget for 2026. But it will be reviewed through the normal process with Jabe, the economists, and Gaker to deliver a revised estimate in December. And I think that's it. We all know the process. This is regular way process. We've started the budgeting process with our teams, and we are in the normal process of beginning to get ready for December.
Thank you, Secretary Cummings. I won't ask if there are questions. We have lots of questions because I can see notes being taken. So my seatmate to my right is chomping at the bit. So you can go on. Senator, you can go on and get started.
And understanding there won't be Medicaid cuts in 2026. So you guys will be history. But between 2028 and 2042, UVA and VCU, the 2 providers of last resort for Medicaid patients, will see a decline in reimbursement from $499 million a year to $233 million a year. Is it your position that nobody's going to lose Medicaid service because of that more than 50% cut over 14 years?
It's our position that nobody will lose access to Medicaid, and that these cuts will be phased in gradually, and that hospitals are in a financial position to be able to absorb this over time.
So the hospitals,
Senator Deeds,
the hospitals will be able to absorb a more than 50% cut over 14 years.
I think it would be helpful for anybody who really wants to dig into this to go and look at publicly available information, look at the financial situation of all hospitals, and assess for yourself what the beginning financial condition of those hospitals are, because they are making a lot of money. No criticism, but there is significant opportunity for them to absorb this. And I will add, bear in mind that Medicaid rates are 191% of Medicare rates, so they're obviously making a lot of money with the current program, and there is room for them to adjust what the costs are.
Madam Chair.
Senator Dees, I saw you make 8 notes over there, so you can go ahead.
With respect to this, to SNAP and the governor's announcement yesterday, what is your information on the error rates? Where does that information come from?
The error rates are actually known to the federal government. They come back as they run their models. What we have is we are one of 7 states that administer this locally. Our error rate is 11%. Nobody is denying that that's the case. We have to get it down below 6% to take our penalty down from, 270 million down to 0. And it's something we think we can do by getting on this quickly. It's never been focused on because there was no accountability for it.
Well, Madam Chair,
Senator Dees.
what's the plan?
The plan is, the executive director from the governor issued yesterday, is to form a working group with HHR, with localities, with finance, to dig in and see what we can do to fix this. It's complicated. You have a lot of individual, important, we're only one of 7 states that do it this way, and so it's complicated, but we can fix it. Nobody has tried to fix this because it wasn't a thing before this.
Madam Chair.
Senator Dees.
It's locally handled by local departments of social services.
BSS offices locally.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you.
I'm trying to recognize the hands in order that I see them, so let me see if I can go. Delegate King, and then I think I saw Senator Hashmi, Delegate Page, Senator Hayes. I said Hayes. Hayes. My delegate. And then I see Senator, are you all remembering the order that I call your names? Serval, and Serval.
Oh, boy.
Then for Vola. And then Senator Marsden. Please try to remember the order.
Who's on first?
Thank you, Madam.
Delegate King.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I will try to be brief, but a couple of questions. And first, I want to apologize to you because I feel it's so unfortunate that the governor gets to come in and say all of these things and then leave you to answer the questions. But first, I see the Bureau of Labor Statistics at the federal level as the, referenced here strongly. Is this information before or after President Trump fired everyone?
Is the information here?
Here, yes.
Well, we're reporting whatever is the current information that's been provided.
Okay,
and I'm sorry, and this does reflect the reduction of the last 3 months numbers. So everything you see here includes those adjustments.
Okay, and given the upheaval and sort of the political firings and things of that nature, do you still believe strongly in how valid this information is?
I have huge concerns. I think everybody agrees the system is broken. There's a lot of things to read. I've listened to 2 Bloomberg podcasts interviewing the prior commissioner of BLS. Fascinating. He says, absolutely, the system is broken. We've gone on non-farm payroll. We've gone from response rates of 80% down to 40%. But that's a first month data delivered. Then they get more data a month later because people are slow in delivering, and more data the next month. And that's what is leading to adjustments, not just in numbers, but the models that they use can get better. But they also will say the models have not been updated. The systems are not updated. It's broken. And so when you see the Fed saying the 2 things that we watch closely are cost of living through inflation and jobs through BLS labor surveys, if you have one that is clearly broken, and the world weighs on, oh, this is coming at 1:30 on Friday, I got to know that number, that's a real problem. And I think everybody agrees that it's got to get fixed, and we can debate whether it's being handled the right way, but everyone agrees it's going to have to change.
Okay, and I think by everyone, you mean who exactly?
Everybody. Well, who doesn't? No, honestly, the administration believes, and I think clearly it's got to be a trusted number. It can't be viewed to be a politically driven number, but I think then people know that. I have a lot of confidence in some of the advisors of the administration, like Scott Bessent, who is a very, very bright person, understands the consequence of this, and I trust that it will be fixed in a way that people can rely on. And it may mean you get the data later, but I think there's a core problem of how they actually collect it.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, really quickly, I'm glad that you have confidence, but a lot of folks who are relying on us, especially to provide their health care, don't feel confident. You mentioned that the governor mentioned that no one will lose their health care, but when these requirements were installed in Arkansas, 18,000 people lost their health care. And while 7%, as you say, may seem like a small number, but that is 40,000 Virginians, some of whom may be diagnosed with cancer, some of whom may have children with chronic conditions. So this is a real life situation that we can't just rely on what President Trump and his allies are telling us. We need to, so my question for you is, there was recently a proposal to use rainy day funds to cover the gaps in Medicaid. If that were to happen, how would that impact our fiscal forecast?
Well, I can't say what's going to be part of the next upcoming budget, so I'm not going to comment on that thought and that idea. When you say lost their coverage, they chose not to go perform the activity that was required to keep their coverage. It's a choice. It was not lost.
Okay.
And then when you say somebody who's got cancer, these are able-bodied people who don't have children. It's not somebody who is sick, who cannot, that's just not consistent with what the intent of this.
And finally, Madam Chair, let me just say this. Maybe you've never had to rely on Medicaid. Maybe you've never had to go through the process, but I was a kid raised on this system, and it is not easy to acquire these. You don't just wake up one day and go fill out one piece of paper to get these requirements. And when you add other things to that, it makes it even more difficult. So further, for those who are battling cancer, you are not able-bodied. If you are facing chemo, you are not able to go out and volunteer for 80 hours a month. So in closing, I would just like to say, I need you all to be real with us, not just parrot talking points from DC.
Yep.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Delegate King. Let's run down this list again, and we have 6 minutes. Watts, Hashmi, Hayes, Searle, Favola, Marston, and I saw Krezak, who was the last one to raise your hand. Let's see if we can try to manage this in 6. Okay, I may give you a couple more minutes, but let's get started.
Okay, 6 minutes is going to be difficult. Therefore, I'm going to Madam Chair, I'm going to then raise my concerns and let you then respond rather than shaping a question. So my concerns come far more on the revenue side and on the budgeting side. So first of all, first concern, I have been told, as I listened to the agency head present the year-end director's report, that they were told not to pay anything in before July 1 that would be for services received after July 1. So I am very concerned when I look at the year-end balance. This is unprecedented, and the director had to point it out because the amount of surplus was so much more than what was typical. So I am concerned about whether or not the amount of agency balances are in fact inflated, and we don't have that much going in. The second thing that I would raise is that driving down, yes, the inflation rate which has just been announced is 3.3 for this month. So that 3.3 isn't an average going out, and it was pointed out on Bloomberg News, being my source of information, that this is as high as it's been in 3 years, so that we are definitely on an increase on inflation. So I am concerned then about the sales tax revenue coming in that's not only inflated by people pre-buying because of tariff concerns, but also it's inflated as far as inflation. And if we go into stagnation, stagnation, we will have that revenue problem. And then finally, my other concern concern is that when you give us the year-over-year employment growth, which was slide 14, is this employment where the job is, or is it where the Virginia resident is unemployed? My concern being Northern Virginia, where so many of my constituents and so many of our residents are in fact working in D.C., so is that unemployment in D.C., which is the way the system works, or are these figures saying these are people in Virginia without jobs? The final reason for that concern is that these jobs tend to be at management and professional levels and are 2 times the average salary rate as the rest of the state. So anytime we lose jobs in this area, our revenue is in fact got a double whammy hit because of the amount of income tax that we are losing at that level of employment.
Okay. I'll answer quick questions, and we're happy to follow up with you later.
I don't think there are any quick questions, but I can't give everybody
Not
6
questions,
minutes.
quick answer.
Okay.
On the first one, on year-end revenue, unspent appropriations, we track, in our management processes, we track regular way spend. It's been common practice in the past to allow agencies to prepay for internal services or for outside contracts. We said, why would we do that? Because we have an appropriation in the next budget for things that will be delivered next year. So we said, no, don't you keep taxpayer money and keep doing that, and now have us have another surplus next year. Pulling that money out doesn't put the agency in any jeopardy of delivering because they're fully funded for the next year. On the inflation, let's look at the chart here. This is real data from BLS.
It's just today's news, Bloomberg, that's all, just informing.
I don't know where the new data has come out because CPI, this is fresh for June, and there's 3.1 for core CPI, but July for all items is 2.7. So, and as I said, we do expect inflation to tick up. I don't think that if it's 3.1 or 3.3 on core, which is not the number that the Fed watches, which are both 2.6 and 2.8%. But I'm not denying inflation is going to have upward pressure, but I do not think it's going to become a real problem. And then on the data, it's BLS, so it's place of employment. If you look at federal workers, and we're showing BLS, you should apply about a 50% premium to that to reflect those that are workers that are actually living in Virginia to estimate the impact. So it is, if it's 7,000 people shown up as place of work, then it's going to be more like 11,000, 10 or 11,000 of place of residence. And we watch that closely. And yes, there's an impact, but year over year, our collections for the month of July, were higher this year than they were last year of federal employees living in Virginia. So we're not seeing that yet. And not saying it won't, because as you know, we have the fork in the road people all coming off here in October, and we expect that's going to show a dip.
Hashmi, Hayes, let's get the 2 of you done.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And
I'm adding another one on here.
and I have lots of questions, but I will try to
have my
stick with
number.
our time. So I'm really concerned about what I see as 2 perfect storms that are brewing, and that I didn't see really fully addressed in the report you painted. And I know we can quibble about the impacts that Medicaid will have on so many Virginians. The reports I'm seeing and people I'm talking to, and certainly our folks in the hospital and healthcare professional fields, are absolutely very concerned about the crisis that we're about to see. These are not just discrete elements that are happening by themselves, they're happening collectively. And when we put all of those pieces together, I am very concerned about Virginia's forward movement in being able to provide comprehensive health care and preventative care, as well as support all of our families. Now, a couple of things. The Congressional Budget Office does estimate that in Virginia, almost 480,000 Virginians will be displaced off of Medicaid coverage. We can quibble about whether they're able-bodied or not, but the reality is that that we are going to see almost 480,000 people lose their coverage, and one way or another, we're going to have to figure out a way to respond. On top of that as well, we know that Congress has yet to move on reauthorizing the enhanced premium tax credits, and until that reauthorization occurs, if it occurs, that's another segment of this crisis where we're going to see many individuals and families lose their health coverage or see their premiums spike, some as much as $1,200 a month that they have to pay in addition to that. All of these factors are then going to impact our workforces and our healthcare system. We're going to see a shortage of services and certainly our ability to attract and retain our workforce in the healthcare. We know our rural hospitals are already facing a crisis. 6 of them here in Virginia have been identified that will potentially shut down. That will also then transfer more impacts on our entire system. And then the second perfect storm, which I really did not hear addressed in the presentation, is our agricultural industry. The ways in which our workforce that relies heavily on immigrant workers is going to be impacted. The impacts that we're seeing on tariffs on our exports of products, the cuts to USA, USDA, USAID, and SNAP benefits, all of those concurrent impacts on food processing, manufacturing, distribution. I know those are 2 big buckets. I'm wondering if you could just address them briefly.
Yeah. Madam Chair, I could address do you want me to address anything in particular or get through questions or receive
Let's
questions
get through
we
the
can
questions
respond
because some might be duplicative, and I'm not going to be able to hear from everybody. So I'm hoping that you all would just direct your questions to Secretary Cummings at the end. So let's finish with the questions. Delegate Hayes.
I absolutely want to respond to you, and I think maybe a follow-up on every one of those questions because I have thoughts and our teams will have many more thoughts.
Great. Delegate Hayes, let's get through the questions, and if we don't get to all the answers, then you all can see them after. Delegate Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary Cummings, I'm going to come from a little bit of a different angle, if you will. The Commonwealth in years past has committed itself to make sure that every household, every community, every region has the information technology bandwidth to fully participate in our economy, our schools, education, as well as the job force, and healthcare for that matter. Yesterday, there was an announcement about, I think the administration said $600 million investment in the broadband funding, while that number originally allocated for the Commonwealth coming for BEAD allocation was $1.48 billion. What happened to the close to $900 million that is not going to be allocated or used, and why?
Yep. I am not close enough to that to give you a thoughtful response, so I'll be happy to follow up with you. Yep.
Next question, next speaker, and I'm going by 2 lists, and they're both the same, so it looks like it's going to be Serval, but not Serval.
Got it.
Okay.
I'll wrap them all Servals together. Secretary Cummings, thanks for the report forthcoming tomorrow. I appreciate y'all getting back to me on that. I hope it shines some light on these surpluses, so-called surpluses. First of all, whenever you get back to us, this tax relief number y'all put in this slide, you claim that the typical Virginia family gets $4,600 a year over 4 years. 2/3 of this number is from the military retirement income tax subtraction. Of the $12 billion, $8 billion is from military. And I know that the typical Virginia family is not a military retiree. And it seems to me you've taken the military retiree number and spread it across the entire Commonwealth as if every Virginian is getting some of that back, which is not the case. And so it'd be helpful if you could provide us with a corrected document that...
You're 100% right. This is a blended number, not intended to make anybody, just mislead anybody, but we absolutely have it broken down between military and non-military.
Okay, well, when I take $4.6 billion and divide it by 8 million Virginians, it doesn't come anywhere close to $4,600 per family or per person or whatever. I mean,
There are
obviously,
8 million families.
I get it, but you can estimate it based on that. But anyway, it ain't close, number one. Number two, you know, the governor stood up here and said a million times repeatedly, nobody's coming to throw off Medicaid. The Congressional Research Service, which is the agency America relies upon to tell us the answers to these things, says that millions of Americans are going to lose their Medicaid. And I want to know why, 11 million. I want to know why the governor thinks the Congressional Research Service that Congress relies on doesn't know what they're talking about, because apparently he's decided he's smarter than them. That's what I want to know. With regard to Senator Hashmi just raised this as well. There's 100,000 Virginians that are going to lose their health insurance coverage, according to the State Corporation Commission, pursuant to a report they put out last week and also a letter they sent me. And that's going to happen on January the 1st, before this governor leaves office. I want to know if the governor has a solution or a plan to save the health insurance for those 100,000 people, or whether he's going to actually point the finger at Republican Congress and tell them to reinstate the provider health care credits so 100,000 Virginians don't lose their insurance. We have to come up with a solution for that, or 100,000 Virginians are not going to have their insurance. I have that question. The last set of things is, you know, a lot of these slides sort of flip between Virginia numbers and federal numbers, depending on, I guess, which people want to cite, because some look better than others, okay? But as Delegate Watts just pointed out, today, Bloomberg reported that wholesale inflation in America accelerated in July by the most in 3 years. Just came out this morning as you were taking the podium.
PPI.
A wholesale inflation. It said wholesale prices rose 2% from July, 2.7% last month compared to July 2024. It's up from a pre-pandemic low of 2.3%. Core consumer prices rose 3.1%. All of these are 50% higher than the Federal Reserve's 2% target. In other words, inflation is out of control compared to where the Fed would like it to be historically, okay? And it's nice to have surpluses, but when you have big inflation, you're going to have big surpluses because everything costs more. That's what happens. Prices go up, sales taxes go up, wages go up because you have inflation. So while we can point to surpluses, a lot of this is inflation driven. When this governor came in, we were looking at coming out of the shadow of 10% inflation. So, I mean, you know, these surpluses are, okay, but now we got Trump inflation, okay? So it'd be helpful to understand how this administration differentiates between what's inflationary caused and what's actual economic growth. And the last thing I would just point out is the BLS on July 18th said Virginia was the only state in America where unemployment rose. The only one. I didn't hear the governor repeat that, okay? But unemployment in this state is rising faster than it is in the rest of the Commonwealth. And I would submit that if you look at Northern Virginia real estate numbers instead of the statewide numbers, which you cited, in Northern Virginia, year over year, the median price of a home was down 1.3%, according to NVAR, in Northern Virginia. Okay, the months of inventory is up 46% year over year. The average days on market is up 42% year over year. Pending sales are down, housing inventory is up, sales volume is up. In other words, Northern Virginia real estate market is starting to crater, okay? And that's the engine of this state's economy. And so while you might think the Commonwealth's strong, there's a whole lot of red flags on the horizon, hurricane warnings that are coming, and that's the kind of stuff that I'm worried about. It'd be helpful if you all would respond to.
Well, that is a
Mouthful.
couple hours of response, and I'd be happy to respond to every one of them because I got thoughts on all of them, and I can debate with you the sources of the data and the interpretation of the data. We are not parsing and selecting federal versus local. We do what we think is appropriate to provide both, and I've got disagreements with a good part of your what you've been saying. What you talked about in inflation was PPI. That's wholesale price increases, inflation. We do not report that. We look at what happens to the consumer, and it is not that at this point. It may be, but it's not.
Secretary Cummings.
Statistic.
I said we were going to stop at 11 o'clock. We really are going to stop at 11:15. So I want everybody who's left to get their questions asked because they want to be on camera. And
I'll just sit down then.
and that way you can respond to them after we're done. So in this order, Favola, Krizak, no, it was Favola, Marsden, Krizak, and Wiley. So let's see if we can do that in four. Wyatt. I'm sorry, Wyatt, not Wiley. Wyatt. And so let's do that in 4 minutes, and then you all kind of just huddle in the corner to get your answers, okay?
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Secretary Cummings. I'm going to keep my questions, my two questions very brief because my colleagues have already set the context. But one incredibly important gap that's missing from all of your slides is it is going to cost us money, large amounts of money, to meet the administrative burden of implementing programs that, in fact, nobody has demonstrated there's a lot of fraud and abuse, and nobody has demonstrated they have not been working well, but yet we're going to be spending, I've heard from other groups that do analysis, millions of dollars to set up a Medicaid program that will enable recipients to apply every 6 months. A program that we have to set up for SNAP that will monitor our error rate with the expectation that if we, as you know, go over a certain level, we could be at risk of losing federal dollars. This is an incredibly burdensome operation, and here we are not trying to coordinate programs in a way that would best serve the individuals, many of whom receive these programs because of their income or other eligibility requirements, and we're just segregating them all, making it more difficult to apply, and then putting money into an administrative overhead rather than the programs. So I think I've been told that you're going to respond to our question, so you don't have to come up with the dollar amount now.
Respond to you in the corner over there.
Okay.
So you have one more question?
Madam Chair, I'm finished for the moment.
Thank you, ma'am. Marston,
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just have a quick
Wyatt, and Krizak.
Just have a quick question, Madam Chair. Have your federal job loss calculations accounted for the federal employees who have taken the early buyout and will continue to get paid and be paying withholding tax through, I think, September of this year? Has that been included in your calculations?
Not yet, because they're still technically receiving employment. I mentioned this earlier, that we expect that will show up in October.
In October?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
We expect that will be a significant event to watch closely, but that's coming.
Wyatt?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be brief, just a comment. Mr. Secretary, I want to thank you for working with the legislative branch and over the last 3.5 years, and I'm going to return this conversation back to Virginia and the state level. And I want to commend everyone for the $125 billion in capital investment that has been done in infrastructure and pad-ready sites. And I jotted down just a few successes that are coming to Virginia to create those jobs, to get us out of this and revenue, increase that payroll tax that we heard 11%, Lego, AstraZeneca, Kalahari Resorts, EdgeCore Digital, Commonwealth Fusion, Micron Technology are just a few. So again, thank you. I know Virginia will continue to grow and invest. We see the market continue to increase, so people have confidence in the economy. Folks have confidence in the Virginia economy, and they will continue to spend, continue to come to Virginia for those much-needed jobs, those good-paying jobs, $40, $50, $60 an hour jobs that these companies are going to bring to Virginia over the next few years. So I want to thank you for working with the legislative branch over the last 3.5 years. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You cannot believe how hard the team works on it, and I will say, in particular, the governor, this is governor on steroids going after making this happen. His personal engagement is stunning.
Following Delegate Krizak, there will be no more questions, and you can get your answers later.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a yes or no question, so you can answer it right away. I'm a little worried about that. Some see the rainy day fund as a panacea, and I wanted to get some clarification, kind of following up on Delegate Munding King's question on Medicaid and the rainy day fund. Isn't it your understanding that the rainy day fund can only be used if there's a shortfall in forecasted revenue?
A part of it is correct. The Revenue Reserve Fund is quite restricted, but the other piece of it is something that has more flexibility, whether or not that something would ever be used for that kind of purpose.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There being no further questions, the committee will rise. Thank you.